I want it that way. There's some kind of continuity between these videos now. Hello, it's Jack, and I'm here to discuss the final episode, and I guess the whole thing now of Tell Me Why. It's been a fun 3 weeks doing these videos as the episodes go up. You could actually probably track my beard growth pretty well going through these videos. But the game itself, it's now complete. We have got everything we need. How was it? It's good! It's not just good, it's actually pretty great, actually, I think. I was actually really surprised that I liked this in the end. I actually thought that I was going to not like the end. I thought that they were going to drop the ball in some very kind of stupid way that I think has happened a few times in Don't Nod games previously. But that hasn't happened. It's basically just retained this great emotional core all the way through, and I love it. This whole game has been just great. I actually really liked it. It's been one of the better games I think I've played this year. And this third episode actually elevated things, where I thought that there would be like some cracks that would just split and crumble the whole thing. No, things are better because of things that happen in this episode, and I genuinely really like it. The twins are, like, as ever, just really strong characters. Easily the best characters Don't Nod have ever made, and their story is what makes this game. Like, there's a ton of other things going on in this game, from like tiny little subplots to actual mystery and intrigue, but it's the story with the main characters which holds everything together, that makes everything as good as it actually is. I'm actually kind of thrilled to be talking about this in such a positive way. I did not want this to be bad, and it's not. Hooray! And I think the most telling thing is that this story would be lesser if it wasn't so focused on its representation. If this story wasn't about a trans character and was instead just about some kid who was like just troubled, somewhat generically troubled, or just in shock from being with their mother, no, it would be worse. It would be unquestionably worse, I think, and the trans representation is fantastic, and it genuinely elevates the experience of this game. So we'll just get right into the non-spoilery discussion, because the spoilery discussion is going to be the rest of the video. So what do we got? All my worries were basically unrealized with this game, and my expectations were exceeded in quite a lot of places. Episode 3 fleshes out parts of this game that I didn't think the game was going to actually do, and that never even crossed my mind for them to actually do, and it's a great surprise for it to be like this, and genuinely come across human, emotional, with like fleshed out characters and story that I just didn't expect from the game. It's quite nice. I've mentioned already, like, the story of the twins just being the best part of this game, and I can't stress enough how they are, and I'll tell you why. It's you get it? I'll tell you why. I've stressed enough, like, how much the twins are the best part of this game, and I think I mentioned last week that I think the main reason is that they feel real, because they fight, they disagree, but then they're also like love each other as siblings, and it's great. And it's more than just that, because the twins develop, but in a way that feels much more human than other parts of the story maybe do. But one of the other things I think is that the twins develop in a way that feels human, in a way that other parts of the story possibly don't, and it maybe makes them shine a bit more. That's a bit of a backhanded compliment, but sure, you know. They both really learn from one another, they both genuinely develop over the course of the game, and there's just a wonderful arc presented between the two of them, where both of them have basically their own struggles to come to terms with that have been based on their circumstances, and it's just great to see them pull it off. Nothing detracts from the twins' story. I keep skirting around like the ideas that some parts of this game aren't as well written as the others, and I think maybe the side characters could maybe have done with a bit of work, or maybe a lot of work. I'm not convinced by basically anyone who isn't like crucial to the story. The exception is maybe Michael, who's like a pretty cool dude, but I think I'll talk about him more in the spoilery discussion, because there's some bits even then that make me question a bit. And everyone else just kind of feels like an archetype that like doesn't feel quite as fleshed out as they possibly could be. I think of Sam, who's just like this drunk redneck, and like all of his scenes just revolve around him being sad drunk redneck, and you know, he's got his reasons, but it's not exactly handled well, or at least not as well as it should be compared to maybe everything else in the game. It comes across hammy. It comes across very, very hammy at times, with all the characters, really. But as I say, the twins are like absolutely the highlight of this game. And I'll tell you one more thing, actually, about the twins that really surprised me. Tyler is trans, but his story doesn't overshadow Allison. Both twins get the same amount of treatment, and they both come across, I think, really, really well in the game, and I love that. I love the fact that they don't necessarily focus entirely on Tyler because he's the trans, so he's got the most interesting part of the story. And then Allison gets left behind. That doesn't happen at all. Both of these people are genuinely realised, are genuinely great characters, and I love it. I love them. And it all comes together. It all ends satisfyingly, and I really like that. I didn't get that from Life is Strange, and I've got that here. That's great. The choices end up mattering in this game. Like, the payoff with, like, Allison and Tyler's, like, relationship choices, which I'd, like, talked about in the previous video, that maybe was a little bit hokey, and yeah, you do kind of want them to make up still, but it pays off. There is an actual, like, reason for it when all things are said and done. Heck, the memory mechanic almost pays off. Almost. I can't quite explain why before we get into spoilers, but it almost does. Yeah, just no spoilers, play it. Play this game. You can get it on like Game Pass for like super cheap, or you can just buy it. It's really, really good. It is absolutely a good time, worth your time if you're into these sort of like narrative games like The Walking Dead or Life is Strange. It's great. I'm genuinely happy I played this game. Right, no more hampering my discussion. We're getting into spoilers. And there's a lot to really talk about in this episode, and I don't know where to start, so we're just going to take everything in order. We're just going to go like beat by beat, because there is a lot in this episode. There's not as much like deadbeat work like they did with episode 2, which is good. I'm glad we didn't do that again. So we see Allison's trauma, her unchecked trauma, just manifesting itself horrifically for her. She's just having the worst morning, and I think it's a good presentation of like her anxiety. She like imagines these bad thoughts, these bad scenarios being projected to her by people she knows. I'm not too big a fan of the dream sequence at the start, actually. It's absolutely nothing posed artistically. That's... no. I'm sure you can say it has a meaning, but it comes across much better in the opening scene. All of these things are basically the workings of her imagination and nothing else, and that's fantastic. That's really, really good. And I'm glad it's the workings of her imagination, because the game really worried me for a second. When we start to see Eddie and Eddie's like yelling at her, I was like, oh no. Is this like a memory? Was Eddie secretly abusive and she's just forgotten because she was taken in, or she's like covering for him? Oh no, don't do this, don't do this. And they didn't. It's completely in Allison's head that she's just imagining some kind of hypothetical worst case scenario where people irrationally hate her, and I was just about to say that's really good, but it's not good for her, but you know, it's really good for me, the audience. So I'm glad that the Eddie thing wasn't actually real. Eddie seems very nice. He is genuinely a very nice guy, and it was around then I was thinking he's probably not the father, because the father knocked Tyler out like while he was setting the barn on fire. That's a villainous thing to do, and it just seemed out of character for Eddie at this point. He just seemed too nice, although there was more stuff we'll get to later about Eddie. And then Tom comes knocking at the door, and, you know, you have a chat with him for a bit, and he's coming off a little bit strangely. He's coming off almost like there's double meanings behind every sentence he's saying. I don't know why that is. Anyway, then we start talking to Michael, and he kind of soothes us, and he does this with Tyler later on, but I just want to like address sort of Michael here. He's like really socially liberal, he's like into environmentalism and stuff like that. He's a big part of in his native tribe. He's like a big voice of reason in this game. He gives advice that people listen to that's really like sage and wisely, even if he doesn't actually have like any experience in this situation whatsoever. But he's like, I suppose, in touch or in check with like emotions and stuff. Eventually I thought of that specific kind of character who's like more ethnic than the other characters, and he gives out like sage wisely wisdom to help the heroes in their quest. As soon as that thought entered my head, I couldn't really shake it, to be honest with you. I'm not saying that Michael is problematic. I'm not saying that there's anything necessarily wrong with him. The thought entered my head and it didn't really leave. But he's fine. He's fine otherwise. He's a good character. I don't think you can really like comment on the racial stuff in this game anyway, because it's not really a thing. It is at most background noise, and even that might be generous. It's just something off in the distance that's to be noticed, but not really anything of note, if you see what I mean. It's not really a flavour of this ice cream, it is just like some of the sprinkles on top. Maybe I'm looking at it all wrong. Maybe the reason he's so smart is because he's super socially liberal. If the guy was actually vegan, he would probably be omniscient. Anyway, we hang around with Allison like for a bunch of this episode, and I kind of like that because it really demonstrates to the player like her distance from Tyler. Like, we're just with her and we feel all alone. We can even like try to use the voice and we'll just get like no response in return, and I don't know if like they're actually cut off or if there's like a distance thing. They've never said like if there's a distance, although I suppose at the end we show that there is no distance at all. They can just do this whenever, which is kind of nuts. We don't explain this power anymore. We don't explore why we have it. It's just there. We're just going to have to deal with it. We're not interested in that in this story, and to be honest, the excuse we'd probably get is not going to be as good as we want it to be. Allison continues suffering from her anxiety throughout, and including a full-blown panic attack, and it's done incredibly well. Not necessarily originally. There's just like the how do you represent anxiety, or everything's really closing in on her, you feel claustrophobic even though you're right outside. But it works. It doesn't matter if you're not being totally original in what you're doing, as long as you're doing it well, and this game does actually represent it well. There is time and care put in. There's even like a little phone minigame to calm down, to time your breathing to, which goes on a bit, but I like that they put it in, and I suppose it goes on a bit so to show that you cannot just recover from a panic attack just like that. Anyway, we see Eddie, and to be completely clear in my choices, I confess straight away because Allison is trying to shoulder a lot of things here and she needs help. She absolutely needs help, and I'm like, this girl needs therapy. Like, Tyler's had therapy and he's fine. Allison hasn't, and she's not. Just saying. And the first step of that is talking to someone that she knows, who is Eddie, who's like a father figure that she has. And you know what? We confess to him that we stabbed Mom, and Eddie just reacts in the most caring way I think you could possibly react in such a situation. He is flawed, but he is like, I'm here to support you, and oh my god, this must have been so hard for you to like hold on to for all this time. It's like, you're not the dad. You're not the dad, are you? Because otherwise you would have known about this anyway, and also you wouldn't have been like so villainous earlier if that was you under the hood. So yeah, that just basically absolved Eddie in my head. I wonder who else it could be. We kind of sag in the middle of this episode by going to see Sam, and Sam isn't really done very well in this game. I mean, that whole section just feels pointless because we know it's not Sam. We know it's not Sam. That guy in the hood is too thin to be Sam, sounds nothing like Sam, and Sam just seems too mopey and drunk to be this like hardened, gonna burn down the barn that I made. No, it's not Sam. But we have to pay lip service to it maybe being Sam, so we spend like half an hour to 45 minutes just wandering around and talking to him in like awkward fashion. I'm not a fan of it. And himself, he's not handled very well. He's handled like just this comic drunk, basically. He's not meant to be funny, but it's just so, like, stereotypical and exaggerated. There's not a lot of nuance to it. I mean, I didn't listen to his story, I just kind of yelled at his face. I didn't realise that it was an option to listen to his story until I finished, until I, like, saw the choices at the end, and I was like, oh, okay, fine. I guess I missed out on that because I wanted this guy to sober up, which he needs to sober up, but okay. When I was yelling at him, I almost thought that, like, Allison was going to, like, hold up a mirror and say, look at you, look at what you've become, Sam, be better, and he was just gonna go full ham, and we were inches away from that, just inches. Also, we, like, talked to him about his, like, wife and kid, and Allison's talking in, like, such a deliberate way to explain to the audience who these characters we're talking about are. Like, Sam knows who they are, like, oh, you remember your son? And he's like, yes, I know who my son is, thank you. And it's like, what? We're doing this only for the audience sake, because the audience has no idea who these characters are. You could possibly say, oh, well, maybe Allison was just being prodding to think, oh, think about your family, Sam, because I'm here to talk about family, or you're a drunk and you should think about your family. I don't know. It comes off really awkward. That's just some don't nod slipping up there again, but again, I'm not saying that it ruins the episode. We still have a wonderful core in which, you know, maybe there's some dead shrubbery around us, but it's fine. Also around his shop are, like, front pages and articles from The Guardian. What? I don't think Sam reads The Guardian. I don't think Sam is in the audience for The Guardian, considering how he was, like, totally confused how to address Tyler in the first episode. But then again, he was drunk, so maybe he just... I don't know. Maybe he's trying by reading The Guardian. By reading The Guardian, he'll become more sensitive to trans people. Or something like that. I don't know. It's weird that The Guardian, of all newspapers, is just hanging out here. Did The Guardian give this game a good review? Anyway, we get a photo from Sam where we can see that there is a loft in the barn, which we saw at the end of episode 2, and the fact that we take so long to get to this attic is kind of weird. Like, we know it exists and we can probably work out where it is, but we just fanny around for most of this episode. I don't know, that's the most nitpicky of nitpicks, but what are you gonna do? So then we get to finally play as Tyler, at long last, and Tyler and Michael go ice fishing together in some more totally gay flirting, and I'm glad at least we have our little kiss moments so that, like, Tyler accepted his compliment is just thrown out the window. We are being very gay here, and that's great. It's a bit weird that their romance advanced so fast. They've known each other like 3 days and they're already kissing, but hey, love at first sight. It's presented believably enough that I don't mind, actually. They have great chemistry, they get along genuinely well. Both performances are actually really, really good in those scenes, and it's just nice. The writing's nice. Again, it feels quite believable. But more important than gayness, we have a fishing minigame. Actual gameplay! So Tyler and Allison make up and we go into the loft, and here's where the episode gets really, really good. Also really kinda dark. So we solve a bunch of, like, genuinely really good puzzles. Like, there's some actual puzzles in this game right at the end, which, yay, happy about that. And we discover that Mom had a kid before us, and that kid passed away. I wasn't expecting the game to go into this sort of thing. We learn a lot about, like, Mary Ann's past in this, and I wasn't expecting them to flesh out Mary Ann as a character properly like this. This is the part where Mary Ann goes from being this, like, thing, this idol, this ghost of the past, and she suddenly becomes an actual person. Someone who had strife, someone who had struggles, someone who had, like, an entire life before these kids were even born. And it suddenly contextualizes everything that Mary Ann did. The book, the stories, the freedom that she, like, gave these kids, and just really cements that she was not transphobic. It's, like, pretty clearly stated at this point, but it's just cemented now. She was not transphobic. She supported Tyler and his life choices. And depending on your choices later, you can even say that this shows a circle of abuse, a pattern in which trauma manifests itself differently as people grow up, depending on how their parents treated them. And it's quite heavy. This all gets very, very heavy and quite somber, but it's refreshing because I wasn't expecting the game to do this, and that's, I think, probably my favourite part of the episode. And it also made me think back to Chapter 2. Yeah, we're going back now. When we're in the graveyard, I noticed something that I didn't mention in my Episode 2 video. There was a grave for a small child, and it was like this eye-catching, like, amount of detail on it. And I was just like, wow, this is weird. Why are we being drawn to, like, a dead child in this graveyard? I don't think it was, like, Leo himself. I haven't double-checked from this video. I will look really silly if it is. I suppose you could say that was foreshadowing, maybe? It was just something I noticed in Episode 2. A clue was there, and it just missed me. I didn't think it was worth putting in the Chapter 2 video, but look who looks foolish now. I wish there was, like, a happier way to, like, tackle this, but there isn't, so... oh. But let's move on to something silly. Should we? Yes, we should, because the big twist. Our father. It was Tom all along. Ah, this has gone cold. Yes, Tom was our father. Tom was having a secret affair, and oh, Tessa knew. Of course Tessa knew that Tom was having an affair, and Tom just becomes, in this, like, comical fashion, a snivelling, maniacal, cowardly villain of this story all of a sudden. Like... he just transforms himself so suddenly. It is Mr. Jefferson all over again, and why? He's at least not murderous. He's got that going for him, I guess. But he doesn't feel great still. But it's really, really comical, the fact he's, like, doing this, and he's, like, begging us to, like, not tell anyone because it'll hurt his election chances, and everyone's just shouting at each other, and he's like, oh, I've got a hidden plan, I know that you didn't kill your mother in self-defense, and everyone's like, wait, what? Yeah, Tom's big, like, plan is that he's going to keep us quiet by the fact that he saw what happened that night. He actually went out and watched Mom, like, just go to us and wasn't going to shoot us. She was maybe going to shoot herself, and we just stabbed her, like, too soon, preemptively, like, before she was, like, we jumped the gun, basically. We just assumed the worst was happening at that moment, and so it wasn't justified that we killed her, was it? And yeah, Tom's basically holding that secret above our heads so that we don't tell anyone about him. Allison's already confessed to Eddie that she's stabbed Mom, not Tyler. So we're already, like, most of the way there, and we can just say, oh, we were, like, 10. It doesn't matter anymore. This happened, like, a decade ago. Who cares? I don't know about, like, statute of limitations, but I'm pretty sure when you're 12 years old and your mum's got a shotgun, you're probably going to get away with it. And guess what? We do. For the choice, I thought it was kind of obvious to pick that what Tom was saying was the truth, because we keep finding out that we were mistaken about Marianne, and this just felt like another way in which we were mistaken. It no longer makes sense for Marianne to be screaming, I'm going to kill you, when we find out we were just wrong about her on so many levels. So yeah, I thought that was an easy choice, but apparently it was an even split on the results screen at the end. 50-50. People were picking the crazy Marianne just as much they were picking the we misunderstood the situation. I was kind of surprised, but hey ho, but I guess that makes it a good choice. Also, speaking of results, Those of you who use the crowbar to open the box, what is wrong with you? Most people did the crowbar instead of solving the puzzle. It's not that hard, and you just ruined the box. You jerks. You absolute asshole. And this final choice sort of contextualized for me why we've had this memory mechanic in this game at all, because it feels like this was the first idea they had, and we've been walking backwards from this. Like, I'm pretty sure that this is like where the entire idea of the game came from. And so we've had to like justify this memory mechanic by putting in these other choices. And that's kind of why I felt that they've all been kind of lame and token. Because they were. Because we just wanted this big one. But, you know, we can't have it come out of nowhere, so we've got to establish it, but we didn't really have any ideas to make any of the other choices feel as good as this final one. It's almost a good enough idea to like justify it all, because like it's a good choice. It actually has consequences, not just like material consequences that you can feel in the game, but you can tell emotionally it does, because it is either the twins accepting their past as they remember it, or that they were wrong and that morally they weren't quite in the right. Again though, they were like 12 years old. I think they can get away with it. But I do wish those other choices were better. This game would have been so much better if the other choices were just a little bit more material, a little bit more impactful than, oh, when we were kids you promised you'd visit. No, you promised we'd visit, and it feels pointless. The idea of like two people remembering things differently also could have just been explored a little better. Like the fact that Tom influenced this memory, like a third party remembered this event differently, when these two already remembered it differently. I don't know, you could have done something there, I feel, and the game kind of doesn't. We do it a little bit, we get like our toes wet, but that's it. Instead, all we have are just a bunch of small choices that don't matter apart from deciding whether or not Tyler and Allison stay friends or whatever. Speaking of which, and then we finally get to see all of our choices pay off about whether we were keeping Tyler and Allison together or separate. Get your fingers right, Jack. I'm not doing another take. And yeah, I managed to keep everyone together, and Tyler and Allison kept the voice, so that's great. We're still not going to question why we have it, but we just do. I've even read the story in the book that tells about how they got the voice, and that doesn't explain anything. And then we get the epilogue, where Tom sucks, Tessa leaves him, and he loses his mayoral race. Allison is now going through therapy. Tyler is getting ready for his top surgery. Sam's going to AA. Everything's working out, and I think even someone's like buying the house now. We also see that Eddie is like setting up this sort of thing with the indigenous people, and in terms of like law enforcement specifically for them. I do wish we did more with Eddie. It feels like there's a lot unresolved, like what was with that thing where he wasn't letting Allison go to this camp? Did I miss something there? It's quite strange. And also, for the fact that we're like dealing with the indigenous stuff like in that epilogue, it would have been nice if we had actually like done a bit more with it in the actual game. But, you know, that's not a huge complaint, I guess. Because, again, the core of this game, the twins, stands tall. And nothing that I have, like, managed to nitpick or complain about undermines that at all. These two are a fantastic pair of characters. They are easily the best characters that Don't Nod has ever made. And I absolutely loved their story. Tell Me Why is just a really good video game. I'm absolutely glad I played this. I'm glad I took the time to like even make these videos because I think they made me enjoy it even more. There's a lot that happens in this game, but the main thing is Tyler and Allison, and they are handled so well. I don't know if it's like the consultancy that maybe elevated this game, but whatever. It doesn't matter too much how we got there. What matters is the end result, and the end result is fantastic. Tell Me Why is a genuinely really, really touching video game. It has a great emotional core, it has a wonderful sense of understanding most of the time, and I just really enjoyed it. It is a fantastic game, and I don't know how many other ways I can say this without repeating myself, but yeah. I hope that Don't Nod continues doing other things. I don't want there to be a Tell Me Why 2, so there's no like theories or anything like that going to be happening here because it's over. And I don't want there to be like a sequel or anything like that. No, not even to explain the powers. Their story's wrapped up. Everything's done in a nice little bow, apart from, I guess, a couple of things from Eddie, but it doesn't matter enough to, like, make an entire sequel about it. The game's great. I'm very happy with it. And I guess I'm looking forward to hearing what Dotenod's doing next. Probably Life is Strange 3, even though this was basically Life is Strange 3. Oh well. So yeah, that ends these videos. I hope you've all had, like, a good time watching these, as much as I've had fun making them. And I will see you later in some other capacity. See ya!